All right, everybody, welcome to Earth Science. If you were not here Friday, the whatever we got here, 7th, here's what we talked about. In this lab, there's some tricky questions like this one: why is it so dry indoors in winter? And I want a pretty decent explanation there. This one with the air temperature and dew point lines. And this guy right here, 63. And 12, really. Knowing those numbers are crazy. These guys here you should be able to answer with the relative humidity and dew point chart. I'm hoping that's pretty solid by now. But the concepts behind this one, they're a little bit trickier. So let's break that down a touch. So we did some quick, I wouldn't even call them notes because I didn't make anybody write this. And you don't have to unless you want to, your call. Dew points. So temperature is temperature, right? There's nothing, I'm not going to try to define that. Let's define dew point real quick, which is the temp at which condensation occurs, right? So you got your temperature, and it might cool down to the dew point, and at that temperature, because dew point is a temperature, a lower temperature, condensation occurs. Dew point can't be higher than temp; it's got to be lower or equal, I suppose, right? So that was really the premise of this section of the lab right here. Take a metal cup with water in it, put ice cubes until that cup is cold enough that you can see condensation on the outside. And the moment you do, it's like, yeah, I'm at the dew point. That's that temperature. I got this can to the temperature at which condensation occurs because there's condensation. So what's the temperature? Boom. There's my dew point, which really is what you should explain right up here. So if that's the temperature at which condensation occurs, humidity here, I don't want to do a definition. I want to more think about this as like a concept, and what it really is a function of the difference between these other two. The difference between temperature and dew point determines the humidity. So let's think of a couple of scenarios. I tried to draw 4 rectangles here, pretending they're thermometers. I'm not saying it's great, but hey, what are you going to do? So let's pretend there's a big difference between temperature and dew points. This will be the temp one. This will be the dew point one. If there's a big difference between these, like what would all that mean? And I know we've had a long weekend now with the snow day. What would that mean? Well, that would mean that the wet bulb would have evaporated a lot. That would mean that their wet bulb depression was really high. That means that it's really dry out. So the bigger the difference is, the more dry it is. Whereas if temp and dew point are pretty much close together, and again, the dew point has to be either equal or lower. But if there's only a very small difference between them, again, what does this mean? And I'm just going to say the opposite of what I did in the last one over here. If they're very close together, that means when you spin the psychrometer, the wet bulb, not a whole lot of water is going to evaporate. That depression's not going to be very high because it already is very humid. So the key part of this, even if you're a little struggling with that idea, here's like the meat and potatoes. What do you really need to get through those difficult questions? It's these two rules. If temp and dew points are close together versus if temp and dew points are far apart. Golden rule will get you there. What does this mean? If they're close together, again, that's this scenario, not a whole lot of evaporation happening, then the humidity is going to be, let's make it a different color. It's going to be humid. Whereas if temp and dew point are far apart, it's going to be dry. All right. This screenshot, take a picture with your phone, whatever it takes. Write it down on a scrap of paper. This is the rule that will save you on that question, and this kind of scary question. Okay. So let's answer that indoors one. Right now, all weekend, clearly yesterday and still today, it's humid outside. And the way the things that I'm looking at to note that it's very cloudy. There's been precipitation like crazy. Okay, it's been snowing a lot. So it's got to be very humid. That's what humidity is, moisture, right? So I'm saying outside right now, what would be the deal with the temperature and the dew point? If we went outside, and if what I'm saying is true, which it is, the temp and dew point would be close together, right? So now here's what I want to picture. And again, this is going to answer this question for you if you take your time with it. That's outdoors. The temp and the dew point might be close together. When you bring that air inside and you start a fire in a fireplace, which one of these two are you going to raise, the temperature or the dew point? You're really only going to raise the temperature. Meaning what you've done is you've taken that air outside where the temp and dew point are close. That's outside over here. You bring it inside, you raise the temperature, but you leave the dew point where it is. So what that results in, there's now a large difference between temperature and dew point. And what we're saying is that that's what dry is. That's what dry air is. Same idea graphically on this question. If they're close together, when is it snowing? It's going to be when they're very close together. In fact, there you go. There's the answer right there. When is it blue skies? When they're far apart, because the further apart those two lines get, the drier it is. You make those two things far apart by heating your house without adding moisture. And there is one thing here that says, how might you counteract this effect? If you have a humidifier, one of those things that like looks like it's pumping out steam, that can help add moisture to your house. Okay, if that's confusing, rewatch it, and you got to get through that. And it all uses this rule: rely on this. And I'm not saying it's super simple; it's kind of a heady concept, but you can get it with a little practice. Watch that multiple times. Give it a go. I think that should do it. If you can wrap this lab up with those ideas, I do say here, just to throw it out there, create an infographic. Don't let that scare you. I just say that, like, sometimes people prefer writing like little blurbs rather than writing a paragraph. If I said write a paragraph, everybody panics, right? Whereas if you do some, like, an infographic would be like, tell me what it's like out here, then like draw an arrow and kind of indicate what you do, maybe with some symbols and some words, or just ignore that and write a paragraph. Do whatever you want. If you can get the idea across of why it's dry indoors using this rule, really in any manner whatsoever, you will be good. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Good luck.